In an era before sequels and prequels were practically guaranteed if the first made enough money, it was extremely difficult to land a second installment to a financially successful property. The demand just wasn't there for people to have a furthering of an already satisfying romp with their favorite characters. This idea didn't really gel with movies, so that hype was normally relegated to novels, with long-running series such as The Oz Books, or Nancy Shrew, or The Farty Boys, or even Cabaret. Point being, unless there was a huge niche market for furthering of the plot, or the author felt so inclined to write a next story, there really wasn't a need for a sequel. Now, though, did you know that in 2016 alone, there have been no less than 20 sequels produced by major Hollywood studios? No wonder people are saying creativity is dead. But you know where that cash grab whoring almost never happens? Theater. For some reason, it is ridiculously difficult to market a follow-up in the world of theater. And today, we're going to explain it, or at least try to begin to explain it. Now, Dustin, I just came to tell you I got over my tantrum from the first episode. Kind of embarrassing on my part. That's great, Leonard. I'm kind of busy here. Well, I should say so. What with your cute cabaret shirt and your camera sitting atop your 10 books. Kind of a shoddy setup for someone with over 1,000 subscribers. Will you just leave me alone? Oh, alright. I just thought I would stop by for my now occasional cameos. When have you ever known me to have recurring characters? Since you thought it up. Just now. I mean, sure, it would be cool to treat this like an actual show, but for now it's just more of a hobby. Is that any way to make money on ad revenue? Only thinking of the money. You suck! You wish. Now, I'll pop on back when you're done with your stuff. Ta-ta. Anyway, let's go through some famous, or in this case, infamous, sequels to popular theatrical works. We'll first look at The Best Little Whorehouse Goes Public, then bring back Birdie, and of course, the most obvious one of them all, the clusterfuck to one of the most perfect, most enduring musicals of them all, Shock Treatment. What? Did you think I was gonna say Love Never Dies? The Best Little Whorehouse Goes Public is the sequel to the classic The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, which takes place in, where else? The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. But shit goes down after a news reporter brings all the illegal activities to light and the bordello has to close down. While it's a bit of a cliche, it's nonetheless a very harrowing musical about wealth, relationships, and self-worth. The Best Little Whorehouse Goes Public, though, mostly fails due to its premise, and it reads as such. The IRS lures former brothel madam Mona Stangley out of retirement to run the Las Vegas whorehouse, Stallion Fields. But that's only part of the problem. Want your original to run for over 1,000 performances? Well, your sequel can run for just 16. Want the original to have 18 original songs? Well, your sequel can just have 5 in the first act alone. I can assume this is because the first act is very story-driven and compelling. Whorehouse Goes Public was widely considered inferior to the original. I mean, if the premise was going to be hard to buy in Sister Act 2, then it was going to be hard to buy here. Whorehouse Goes Public falls heavily into cliché rather quickly, and it's almost unforgivable. I mean, why hire Mona again? Is she the only woman around with any sort of business sense and a brain in her head? That and the music isn't that great. Next, we have Bring Back Birdie. You want Dick Van Dyke to return for your sequel? There's always Donald O'Connor. But you get Cheetah Rivera in both, so I guess it's worth the price of admission and interest. Interest that lasted only 4 nights. Zing! I am a serious dick. This one falls into Crucible territory, meaning that most of the interesting stuff happens before the story begins. The narrator starts the show with this bit of info. Once upon a time, so long ago that New York City hadn't even been bankrupt once, there lived a young man in the music business named Albert Peterson who loved his secretary Rose. His only client, a rock and roll idol named Conrad Birdie, was being drafted into the army, and Rose wanted Albert to give up the music business, marry her, and become an English teacher. Alas, Albert's mother, a frail and gentle old lady with many of the same endearing qualities as Snow White's stepmother, opposed the match. But love triumphed. Conrad vanished, the mother was banished. Albert married his Rose and became an English teacher, and they all lived happily ever after. Till now. I think I just came a little bit. The reason this one didn't really work was due to the fact that only in Bring Back Birdie could we hear a lively tune about a wife doing self-appointed wifely duties. So Conrad is a little diva and runs away before he can be exploited, but returns anyway like you knew he would to perform a song you've already heard. I also think another reason this one failed is because there's a significant lack of Birdie in it. What made the original so poignant was that it was about the hardships and pratfalls of teenagers growing up, and the coming-of-age drama associated with it. It was powerful even for adults. And I think part of the reason the first one was so endeared was because of the era it came out in, the early 1960s. Teenagers ruled the media and were always looking for outlets for their teen angst. I mean, what could be more identifiable than a love triangle and a boy who needs fixing? Lastly, we'll look at Shock Treatment, the sequel to the eventually popular Rocky Horror Show. Now, this one is kind of cheating, because technically Shock Treatment didn't start out as a theatrical production, but it is now, so with my incredibly loose criteria, I am not cheating. The story of this one in no way tries to connect to the previous entry, so that opens up a whole new realm of ideas, all of which are pretty brilliant. Who knew that a film released in the early 1980s would predict what would be on at least 80% of all TV channels nowadays? That's right, Shock Treatment correctly predicted reality television. It also features some great music and some good-ish acting. So, what happened? Well, in order to make a buck from the loyal fans of the first, 20th Century Fox decided to only show the film at midnight releases for a few short weeks. Why would a group of fans want to go watch a movie that specifically catered to their taste? Who would even be behind a production like that? Point taken. And even though Shock Treatment was maligned when it first came out, there's been a resurgence of critical reevaluation that some say puts it right up there with the original. Its cult following hasn't reached the heights of the original, but at least it's there. The reason this one tanked was more or less too much studio involvement in trying to capture the magic of the original. It's not that the sequel is a bad product, it just wasn't marketed correctly. And maybe this line.
Faggots are maggots. Thank God I'm a man.
So we've touched on rehashing, demographic inconsistency, and abysmal marketing, but I think there are two more elements that come into play when sequels are concerned, and that is critical evaluation and audience investment. If an audience doesn't care what happened to some characters in the first installment, why try to profit on an unprofitable idea? There are certain times where this isn't the case, though, as a successful show or movie is based on the first book in a series. Some properties are combined, so several novels in a series are condensed into one entity, a la A Series of Unfortunate Events and Return to Oz. But most shows and movies tend to adapt only one novel at a time, and in most cases, there's only one to adapt anyway. So, going by this, if an audience reads a book before heading to a theater, they already have a vision in their head as to what's going to happen and how it should look. People are going to pay money to see their favorite book come alive. So, how does this impact sequels? Well, if the first one was poorly adapted, I'm looking at you, mortal instruments, then people are not going to pay money to see a second installment, specifically if the second book, or in this case, disappointing follow-up to a wildly successful stage show, received negative press. Why go out and get a second dose if the first one can satisfy your needs? Further, most books that are adapted into shows and movies, keyword here being most, have a definite beginning, middle, and end. Except for the occasional note of ambiguity at the end of a production, these stories have satisfying conclusions that make audiences feel happy with where it ended. Such is the case for the Tuck Everlasting musical, the Color Purple musical, and for irony's sake, Dark of the Moon. These stories are complete, and really no follow-up is necessary lest it spoil the beauty of the first. Most people seem to understand this and like to relegate it to one. However, there are some people that can be coerced and goaded into milking their cash cows. Most notably, Love Never Dies. And let me just say, woof. As stated earlier, there are some people out there who know when to leave good enough alone, and that their product can be rediscovered by a generation every once in a while. That's why revivals are a thing. And while I can't really speak for films in this regard, I'm eternally grateful that the theatrical market isn't oversaturated by sequels. It would make the theater-going experience a lot less special, and it's something that we need to keep intact. Having the elements of the production in the same room with you gives off an important vibe that keeps one interested and invested, which is why theater is one of the most innovative mediums. There are really only so many times that you can go to the movies and experience smell-o-vision. So there was my somewhat organized video essay about theatrical sequels. Join me next week when we talk about... There's going to be a next week? Leonard, what are you... You wanker, you haven't told them yet, have you? I don't know what you're talking about. The fact you're stopping your channel. For educational purposes? Doesn't this ring a bell? Does, yes, but... And that you don't know when you'll be back, but you know it's not anytime soon. You pretty much ruined what could have been a sweet moment. Had to drop the bomb sometime. Leonard is right. I'm going on an indefinite hiatus here soon because I am going to college and I need to get a grip there before I can commit to making any more videos. And it's hard for me to put something on hold that I've been building up for so many years, but I feel that it's a necessary thing that I need to do. So just know that sometime I'm going to be back. I don't know when. And so this is Dustin signing off. But only for now.